Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into my talk. Excited to be here with you all, even in these times when we have to be virtual. I hope to visit South Africa one day um, and be able to do this in person. Thank you to the organizers, Iggy and Theo. You guys have done so much work to create this virtual experience, allowing us to connect and learn from each other. Um, so, as Iggy said, my name is Ariba Jahan. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm based out of New York City, and I'm the Director of Innovation at the Ad Council. And I'm here to talk to you about how we can create better products for our audience with content, interaction, and messaging, an experience that works for their context by creating with our users instead of creating for them. I'm going to give you a minute to read through these headlines capturing what's been happening in our industry over the last few years. So this is what happens when we don't challenge our assumptions. And I'm going to share with you 4 ways you can challenge your assumptions to avoid headlines like those and instead build better and more impactful products for your audience. And the 4 methods I'll share are helping us think about product development differently at the Ad Council. And I'm hoping they'll be helpful to you in your own work. And just to give you some context on the Ad Council, we're a nonprofit organization in America that uses the power of communication to tackle some of the nation's toughest issues, from preventing wildfires to promoting girls in STEM to diversity and inclusion. We work with industry leaders to develop campaigns that inspire action and create change. And our campaigns include everything from public service advertising that you may see on a bus shelter or your favorite streaming platforms to digital experiences and social media activations. And my role as the Director of Innovation involves leading design sprints, human-centered design, working sessions, nurturing a culture where curiosity and experimentation can thrive, and really equipping our teams to use a more equity and human-centered approach to the work that we do. And this includes training our staff on our approach to innovation called Splashbox, consisting of methodologies from frameworks like lean startup and design thinking, with an emphasis on mindsets and team conditions that need to be cultivated. And with 80% of our organization trained, we created a sprint project where our newly trained innovators can apply what they learned in creating a digital prototype for one of our campaign issues. And today I'll walk you through one of those digital prototype projects where our assumptions definitely got in the way and show you how we used those 4 methods to challenge and uncover our assumptions. So we worked on the campaign Teen Bullying Prevention, and the goal of this project was to leverage technology to answer this question: how might we influence teens to reduce peer mistreatment and empower one another by building and perpetuating a more empathetic, supportive, and inclusive culture? Our target audience were teens between the ages 13 to 17-year-olds who also fell into the category of good eggs. And we defined good eggs as teens that believe that they're good people and they really care about being the best versions of themselves, and they value treating others with respect and kindness. We started by doing a tremendous amount of research first, from reading through reports and articles on Gen Zs to interviewing teachers, issue experts, and teens to really familiarize ourselves with the audience and the issue. Our research gave us insightful findings, helping us to generate over 100 ideas and 20 concept designs that included the interactions, content, and language we thought teens will resonate with. We then showed our strongest ideas to teens to get their initial feedback on which ideas to refine, how to refine them, and which ideas to leave behind. And after many rounds of research and early user feedback, we felt pretty confident in our direction. We knew that our solution needed to address these three goals. One, we need to help teens successfully recognize the impact of their actions. Our campaign research told us that good eggs feel a sense of responsibility to create the change they want to see in the world. So we wanted to leverage that and help teens successfully recognize the impact of their actions so that they can choose kinder behaviors. Two, we should double down on social media. We knew that 91% of Gen Z were on at least one social media platform. So we knew that we had to prioritize and emphasize the role social media might play in our solution. Three, leverage the rise of CGI influencers. I don't know how big CGI influencers are in South Africa, but or how familiar you guys might be. But at the time of this project, 4 fictional characters created by computer-generated imagery had accumulated over 1 million followers on Instagram. So we wanted to use this new social media trend to engage teens, whether it was through storytelling or modeling kindness. And in fact, if you look up little Michaela, who is the first person you see on the left, she's a CGI influencer, and she currently has over 2.2 million followers and over 500,000 followers on TikTok. And she is computer generated. And one of our most recent TikTok video was played over 11 million times. Keeping these 3 goals in mind, we refined our 20 concepts into 5 promising ideas, which we also gut checked with teens. And the main thing we learned from their feedback was that we were wrong on all fronts. What we were focused on as goals were actually assumptions. Starting with the word bullying. The only people that use the word bullying were adults who are trying to end bullying. When we asked teens to recall moments of being bullied, they didn't have much to share and instead claimed that they don't really experience bullying. But when we changed our language and asked whether anyone has ever hurt them or if they have ever hurt anyone else, they started sharing stories that involved rumors, drama, shaming, and being excluded. So their language around mistreatment was different. We also learned that they're actually pretty self-aware. When we ask them to recall a moment when they hurt someone, they use words like guilt, bad, upset, and regret to describe how they felt afterwards. So they knew the impact of their actions. They didn't need us to show that to them. And that immediately invalidated any idea we had that involved creating stories and messaging to raise awareness of their actions. We learned that they care a lot about privacy and authenticity than we realized, to the point where they have 2 different Instagram accounts. A Finsta, the fake Instagram account, where they post unfiltered content and only allow a few people to follow them. And the second one being a Rinsta, the real Instagram account, which they keep hyper-curated with perfect filters and crafted captions. This is where they want a lot more followers. If you're someone who has a Finsta and a Rinsta, go ahead and share that with us. Let us know that you have both in the chat. And when it came to CGI influencers, only a few teens even knew what that was. And those that followed a CGI influencer really was only doing it out of curiosity for the character and their fashion. And if you look at their handwritten feedback on the screen, you'll notice what they wanted instead is someone relatable, someone who may have had a tough childhood, or someone who has gone through issues. And they wanted someone funny. Really, they just wanted Kevin Hart. So as you can see, our assumptions were definitely checked. And before I jump into the 4 tactics that helped us uncover these assumptions, I want to talk about assumptions for a moment. An assumption is a belief that we accept to be true without any evidence. And the thing is, we all make assumptions. And the reason it's so easy for our assumptions and biases to creep up, even after a tremendous amount of research, is because our brain is constantly making assumptions in the interest of efficiency. See, the thing is, as long as humans have roamed the earth, our brain has created several mental shortcuts to help our species survive and process the world around us. So we have shortcuts that help us make sense of large amounts of information, determining, what's important to remember and recall, create explanations when there's not enough context, and shortcuts that help us act quickly. This is how we remember, and this is how we learn and remember how to ride a bike, know the answer to 2 plus 2, help us detect what frustration and joy sounds like in someone's voice, and know when to run from perceived danger. But these same shortcuts lead us to make snap judgments, miss certain facts, jump to conclusions, and make decisions based on our biases. And these mental shortcuts are also known as cognitive biases. And with 180 mental shortcuts active in our brain, it's hard to spot when our own biases and assumptions are getting in the way. I'll call out 3 that caught us off guard. We have a mental shortcut that leads us to be easily influenced by what is stored in our memory. That's why we kept using the word bullying and to describe this interaction, instead of checking whether this language still resonates or is still relevant with our audience. And in fact, our early discovery research showed that bullying messaging and content doesn't resonate with kids and teens. But somehow we were still using the word bullying in our language in our interviews. And that's because it's familiar to all of us. And once we saw a pattern in their responses, we actively started changing our language. Another mental shortcut causes us to make judgments and impressions by relying only on the information made available to us. So when we see numbers as high as 91% of teens are on social media, and the fact that they spend 9 hours of their day on social media, we easily place a lot of value on those numbers and start making assumptions like they must be sharing every moment of their life on social. And we don't readily question what information might be missing. Like, does that entire group do all the same things to the same extent? And so what that they're on it? Are they all engaging with the same type of messaging, content, same types of experiences? Are they using the same types of features? And who's not captured in that 91%? And the third mental shortcut I'll mention is one that makes us drawn to details that confirm our existing beliefs. We were so excited about leveraging the CGI megatrend that we paid closer attention to headlines that claimed CGI influencers are the future of influencer marketing, leaving us surprised when teens were not sharing our level of enthusiasm about CGI influencers. So that's how easy it is for our mental shortcuts to come into our work and get in the way of making products that are right for our audience. Our mental shortcuts are really neither good nor bad. They function on a spectrum. On one end, they can help us cope and survive in the world. And on the other end, they can cause us to miss critical information or lead with our assumptions. We don't really get to turn them off, and we don't really have to turn them off. But we do need to have some tactics available to us so that we can check our assumptions. So for the rest of my talk, I'll focus on how we used these 4 methods in the Teen Bullying Prevention Prototype Project. And I hope it gives you inspiration on how to bring these methods into your work. So the first one being map assumptions. It's an activity where we actively uncover critical uncertainties, unknowns, and blind spots about our audience, challenge, and solutions we're exploring. And the thing about assumptions is that they don't always look or feel like assumptions. They feel like facts. So it's important to have a diverse team in the room so that everyone can help catch each other's biases and assumptions. So for our project, we started by asking ourselves questions around teens and their experience with mistreatments. How does it show up and how do they resolve it? And when we mapped our assumptions, we quickly realized that despite all the research we already did, we still didn't know that much. To get a sense of what knowledge gaps to prioritize, we placed them on a 2x2 grid like this, where the x-axis ranged from knowns to unknowns and the y-axis ranged from very important to not that important. This helped us tease out the critical unknowns we needed to dig into next. We then conducted user interviews to learn more about these critical unknowns to get signals on which directions to go. And your grid may look different. You may have different axes that you typically work with. So take what serves you. Some of our interviews were more open-ended and conversational, while others were with a sketch or a prototype to get reactions and responses. And having different teammates do interviews and going through multiple rounds helps us make sense and gather insights around teens' mindsets, their language, what types of interactions they enjoy, and what types of interactions they expect, their language, behaviors, and rituals, and how they approach relationships. And all of this really helped us contextualize the mistreatment experience, as well as what types of interactions we might look into. And those insights helped us refine our 100 ideas to 20 informed concepts. But even at this point, we still had no clue which idea would work. So instead of choosing one idea and hoping it works, we tested 5 of our strongest ideas. We ran several experiments to explore whether or not our ideas will create the desired outcome and to collect new knowledge. So while mapping assumptions was a great place to start, testing our hypotheses really allows us to uncover the invisible assumptions that we haven't noticed yet. And to test our ideas, we did 3 things. We converted our ideas into hypothesis statements to get really specific on what outcomes we believe our ideas will have, which helps us hone in on what we hope to learn from testing. And we identified our riskiest assumptions, which were the beliefs we held about our idea that, if disproven, could break our idea altogether. And the third thing we did was identify how do we plan to test this and get signals on what direction to go. So to convert our ideas into hypothesis statements, we used a Mad Lib framework like this, where you fill in the parentheses with what's specific to the project. So it helps us focus in on the challenge to solve, the solution, and the impact that we hope to create. I'll demonstrate this using the CGI influencer idea as an example. So our challenge statement, challenge hypothesis might be, we believe that teens have a problem noticing the impact of their actions, which leads them to mistreat each other. We believe that a fictional CGI character whose life captures the dramatic realities of the teen experience, including teachable moments where the character models kindness, can help. We believe that teens will follow and relate to the character, causing them to reflect and adopt the modeled positive behaviors in real life. Then, to identify our riskiest assumptions, we started by asking, well, what must be true in order for this solution to add value to our users, for it to be intuitive to use, for it to be, what tone, messaging, and emotion do we think needs to be conveyed? How should the users be able to engage with the information and the experience in it? Then we look through our answers to find the ones that, if disproven, could break our idea altogether. And what stood out to be our riskiest assumption for this idea was our belief that teens will resonate with the CGI character. So this includes that this includes the CGI character's voice, the story that we're trying to tell, the concept of a CGI at all, and how the users might engage with the CGI influencer. So if teens don't connect with a fictional CGI character, then this whole idea kind of falls apart. But by testing our hypothesis this early, we'll get to know that before spending any time and effort creating one. So when we did this for each idea, we ended up with a list of elements and interactions that we were assuming teens would love and resonate with, but had no proof yet. So they needed to be tested before moving forward. Like, do they care about anonymity? Do teens value influencers? How would we need to frame question prompts so that teens would respond honestly? Would they be honest at all? And how do we do this so that this is something they trust and honor? So the third part of the experiment design is identifying how you're testing to get signals of what direction to go in. We wanted to test our ideas and assumptions without building anything. So we used open-ended survey questions, sketches, and rough prototypes to get feedback from teens during interviews and user workshops. And I think during these times where you might not be able to do interviews in person, you can still do them over Zooms, and you can still send a sketch to them over messaging or over by screen sharing, right? So when we did this project, we were able to be with our teens in person. But the way that we would redesign this user workshop is doing them over Zoom and thinking about how to use features like polls or screen sharing to show prototypes and get reactions. And testing multiple ideas with teens was very insightful. But there is a limitation on how much we can learn from testing this way because users are only reacting to what we're showing and asking them. In essence, every method has benefits and limitations, right? So it's good to use a few different methods for our learning purposes. For us, we did testing with prototypes as well as co-creations. A co-creation is when we engage, work with, and empower our users to generate their own ideas. So we co-created with 3 high school classes to learn how students perceive bullying today, what types of digital interactions do they enjoy, to test our hypotheses and our riskiest assumptions, which I just talked about how to create, and see what solutions they would come up with on their own. This is a snapshot of the solutions students came up with when we asked them to design a digital tool that could help others be kinder and more inclusive. We purposely did not use words like teen or bullying to prevent influencing them in any direction. We also gathered user feedback on these new ideas. The co-creations gave us insights we couldn't have learned otherwise. You know, we learned about the way they experience mistreatment, how they cope or don't cope with feeling hurt, and in what contexts these moments are showing up. We learned that they use language in technology. We learned how they use language in technology, their choice in vocabulary, the interactions they prefer, and the content that they want to see, how they used colors and words, and how they see technology fitting into their lives and these critical moments. And the co-creations also uncovered ideas that we couldn't have brainstormed on our own. For example, our students came up with this brilliant idea, which they called "in my bag," which is a phrase teens use to indicate when they are feeling sad or emotional. So this idea is an app that would allow users to airdrop messages to one another to alert their friends if they were not feeling emotionally available at that moment and wanted to be left alone. Earlier, I mentioned that user interviews taught us that teens were pretty self-aware, but what they showed us here in this idea is their own ability and desire to prevent that mistreatment from happening by self-regulating and communicating in a mode that feels accessible to them. And students' feedback on this idea was enthusiastic and validating. They said things like, it's fire, and you can tell people around you how you're actually feeling. And their comments showed that they wanted to be vulnerable and express their emotions, which is contrary to their existing social pressure of acting tough. And the co-creation sessions validated some hypotheses and invalidated others. We took everything we learned from the interviews, tasks, and our co-creations and turned them into 3 new co-created prototypes. So it's been quite a journey, from researching, identifying assumptions, and interviewing for our insights to coming up with over 100 ideas, testing our hypotheses, and co-creating solutions with our teams. There were many moments where our ideas were invalidated and our assumptions were checked, but that's what learning looks like. And although we made progress, it did not come easily. We went out of our way to find a diverse mix of teens to interview and worked with a local high school to plan co-creation sessions. We needed parents to sign permission slips, coordinate around exams and homework schedules, and be okay if a teen totally flaked on us for a phone interview. But it was worth that relentless effort because the audience we were looking to serve was not in the room, and their perspectives were crucial. Which could also happen on projects not involving teens. Imagine we were working on a grocery delivery app and our team is part of a specific socioeconomic community, allowing us to have privileges, options, and access that may be different from those in other socioeconomic communities, or even other cities and countries, causing us to not have the perspective and experience from a different socioeconomic community in the room, leaving us uninformed and with our own biases. So part of being relentless is asking ourselves questions like, are we still solving the challenge that our users need solved? Who haven't we heard from but should? And we all had to be relentless in challenging our assumptions, even on an individual level. For me, that meant, how do I curb my own experience with bullying to make sure it doesn't bias how I look at our work? See, my family and I immigrated to New York when I was 7, and I quickly learned that my skin color made me different enough to be made fun of, and the clothes we could actually afford was not that cool. Then once I was diagnosed with profound hearing loss, wearing hearing aids did not make me popular. Instead, my classmates would steal my hearing aids as a joke. And even my guidance counselor discouraged me from pursuing my dream in becoming an engineer because she didn't think I was capable. All of those experiences has shaped me as a child and as an adult. So on one hand, the fact that I can relate to this project in such a deep way made me super curious and ask really critical questions in really understanding how, where, and when mistreatment is showing up for teenagers now. But on the other hand, I had to manage my own assumptions and make sure that my past experience doesn't get in my way. So just because I was and still am treated differently based on my skin color, identity, and ability doesn't mean that that's the only way mistreatment is showing up. And the way I coped with it when I was younger may not be how teenagers are coping with it now. So although the context of these mistreatments can change over time, it's important to think about how it's showing up and be able to differentiate. So it's my experience that made me care so much about this project that I was rigorous in using different methods to tease out my own assumptions. To empower our teams to be this relentless, we must create a culture where curiosity and innovation can thrive. And that means we should nurture a team to have less of a monoculture of thoughts and ideas, and more seeking perspectives unlike our own, and creating enough psychological safety to flag when we notice that there is a monoculture, where we're spending less time defending our own ideas, but instead spending more time testing multiple hypotheses with a diverse representation of the audience, where we are not constantly focused on finding just one perfect idea or one perfect solution, but instead creating space for everyone to embrace ambiguity and staying curious, allowing us to challenge our own assumptions and make sense of audience's context. And instead of creating reward systems that heightens everyone's desire for perfection and language that heightens our fear of failure, let's create a culture that's just open to learning and being wrong. So think about processes, metrics, rituals, and promotion development milestones you have in place that might be working against this, and how can you reimagine them to cultivate a relentless team. So rounding off, I want you to remember that our brain has mental shortcuts that are constantly helping us cope and process the world around us. But because they function across a spectrum, these shortcuts can also lead us to make assumptions, snap judgments, miss certain information, and jump to conclusions. So while we'd all like to believe that we're not that biased or we're not as biased as other people, that thought is actually a bias in itself. It's called the bias blind spot, and it can cause us to let our assumptions go unchecked, affecting our ability to make the right products for our audience. So remember to map your assumptions and unknowns about the challenge and audience you're solving. Test multiple ideas to see if they create the outcome you're hoping for. And the simple act of reframing an idea into a hypothesis is a great reminder that regardless of how much we love our idea, we just don't have evidence yet. Co-create with your audience to empower them to create solutions that you wouldn't have come up with on your own. And be relentless in making sure that the audience you're serving has been heard, checking to make sure that you're solving the right challenge and aligning with your ethical standards. And lastly, nurture a team that seeks perspectives unlike their own, focuses on testing, stays curious, and is open to learning and being wrong. So instead of fighting the 180 mental shortcuts evolution has ingrained in us, let's use these 4 methods to uncover and challenge our assumptions so that we can make better and more impactful products for our audience. Thank you so much for listening to my talk today. I don't know if we have much time, but I'd love to answer a few questions. And you can always find me at aribajahan.com and at my Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you so much to the conference organizers for UX South Africa for including me in this lineup and bringing me into this community. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Thank you so much for an absolutely awesome, insightful, and knowledgeable talk, Ariba. That was actually, that was very insightful. And I see a few people have actually commented on that they miss New York because they heard everything in the background. But let's run through the questions. So the first question is from Kirian Gilloway. Hi, Kirian. So the question reads, did you encounter any specific difficulties when interviewing teens? Example, getting them to trust you or open up? And if so, how did you deal with those challenges?
That's a great question. So it ranged. There were teens that were super open, and there were teens that were a little shy. I think one of the things that we kept in mind is doing breaking up the interview into segments. So the first portion of the interview was building a relationship and rapport and making sure that the conversation started with things that they're actually feeling really great about, right? So when a teenager is talking to an adult, there's like this natural tendency for them to show that they're mature and being able to share what they're working on, especially their academics. So that's where we would start the conversation, like asking them really open-ended questions, allowing them to kind of share what they're really happy and excited about and proud of, and then leaning into questions that might be a little harder. And we purposely didn't ask questions that were directed at like do you experience bullying? Instead, we would ask questions about, can you share a little bit more about your friendships at school? Have you recently moved? So like identifying us knowing what moments they can typically show up, we would ask about those moments and see where they would go. And I think that naturally created that. And we would also relate to them, right? Like we've all been teenagers at some point. So creating that bidirectional conversation really helped.
Thank you. The next question, and this is from Lindsay. The question reads, this is really interesting and useful. Do you have other case studies we can access online?
Oh, I don't, but I have been meaning to write them up. I do have more projects I've worked on, but sounds like maybe I should do some writing. So thanks, Lindsay. If you have good examples of case studies you've seen, I could take that and try to start doing some writing and sharing those.
Riba, on your website, do you have any resources available on your site?
I do have some blog articles, but I don't have much. I think this conversation is making me realize I should. What would be really helpful is what are some resources this audience would like as a takeaway from this talk? And those are things that could help inform what I create.
Okay. Maybe
so
guys,
go ahead and drop those into the chat. What resources would you like, and what types of case studies would you like?
Awesome. Let's see what they say. In the meantime, we'll jump on to the third question. Guys, if you have if there is another one or two questions, please ask them. So this question is from Kate. If there's anything that has made it easier doing this kind of research with teens as opposed to adults, so is there anything that's...
It's funny you asked that. So we one thing that we really noticed was how quick teens were to create ideas of their own. When we did the user workshop and we just gave them a prompt, they just went at it and were really, really creative. Versus, I think whenever I lead brainstorms within our teams, I think there's always like this hesitation of like, well, I'm not creative enough, so I shouldn't like sketch anything. Oh, my sketch won't be perfect. Versus, we didn't notice those with the teens. They just kind of like created their own designs and mock-ups and just created entire experiences and were very confident about them. So I think that was inspiring to us, and it made us think about how else could we engage them more.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Well, we have another minute or two before we completely close. So guys, if you have any more questions for Ariba, please ask. I mean, like the rest of the day, we kind of cut questions short, but now we've got a few minutes to ask these questions. I know that there are a few videos available, YouTube videos available from some of the different talks that you've done, Ariba. So maybe guys, it's worthwhile looking at those videos as well. I mean, we'll obviously repost this on YouTube in the next few days as well.
Sure. And if people don't have like a specific question, but you have like, I don't know, a topic, I'm happy to explain anything that I went over in the talk too, if that's helpful.
I just want to also mention the question that you asked me when we were setting up in the green room about getting involved.
Oh.
So maybe let's ask this next question, answer the next question before we jump into that.
Oh,
so
sure.
Amanda has asked, how long did the entire process take?
I think this project was maybe a month and a half.
Okay.
And I think that can vary depending on like how many interviews you do, how quickly you're able to schedule them. And with getting, for us, because it involved teenagers, we had to engage parents as well to get permissions. And for the user workshop, we went through a school. So I think those are reasons why it took as long as it did. So your mileage may vary. It may be quicker for you or longer for you. Yeah.
Okay. There's one thing that I'd like to mention to everyone that's here. I mean, there's quite a few people still here. So Ariba has she asked me the question about how to get involved beyond the conference in relation to what could be seen as something that you could help with, assist with in the future, that spans beyond the conference, and maybe you can expand a bit more on what I'm saying, Ariba. But I guess to work with the local community, is there anything or anyone that feels there's a project that Ariba could get involved? I mean, it obviously comes down to availability, time, and all those known factors. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the question I asked was trying to figure out if there is any local communities, and it could be this community, where people are able to mentor or provide support to people that are coming into the UX industry or people who are working on something. So I think it was just a general question around that, like if there were any mentorship programs where I could be a mentor or provide any guidance in that way.
Yeah. So, guys, if you do feel like there is anything, please reach out to Ariba. I mean, we have tweeted a Twitter handle. If you can also reach on aribajahan.com. Yeah. So if there aren't any questions, Ariba Jahan, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Ariba, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for including me. And it's been such an honor to be part of this community. And I hope to see you all again. Please stay in touch.